Hey everybody, I wanted to make this video about the movie draft. Now, I personally love this game, and I don't think it's biased either. Tot likes this game too. It's a fun game and it allows you to use math, facts, and your own intuition to make your decisions. The only problem is that only a few of us understand it. And that isn't right. In order to make this the best gaming experience, everybody should be on the same level. That's why I'm making these videos. I want to explain the game, the rules, the scoring, and even give my quote-unquote expert opinion. I want you all to understand the little nuances of this game that I feel makes it so much fun. Now, let me say, we have a movie draft coming up in about a month. At the end of August, we are going to do a draft for our next game. 44 movies will be on the draft board. A week before the draft, we will list the budgets for the films. I would suggest that you look over those budgets and come up with a plan. That's what I'm going to do. There can only be 10 players in a league, up to 10 players. So I talked about why I'm making this video as well as the upcoming draft. Now let's talk about the rules. First things first, we require a $10 entry fee into this. We are still getting the kinks out of this formula, but it's been my experience that whenever you pay for something, you have something invested and you'll try harder. At the latest, you need to pay your entry fee the day of the draft, right before it begins. But that would be the latest. And there will be no exceptions. If you don't pay, you can't play. Payouts will be awarded to more than first place this time, though. In this upcoming draft, first place will be awarded $60, second place will be awarded $30, and third place will get $10. Okay, so now that we know who gets paid, let's talk about how they get paid. Let's talk about the actual rules. Number 1, all drafts can have anywhere from 4 to 10 people. Number 2, the draft order will be randomized. Number 3, once the order is determined, the draft will begin. Player 1 gets to make his or her pick. After that player makes their decision, the draft will continue in a chronological snake draft fashion. And if you don't know what a snake draft is, I'm going to show a little example right here. This is 4 players in the draft. And we'll follow them. This is round 1. Now this is round 2 and round 3. So you can see how it's going back and forth. Okay, number 5. Number 4. Each player will have 12 selections, so the draft will have 12 rounds. And each person will have 2 minutes to make their selection, each selection. Now, worst case scenario, that means that this draft will last 4 hours. But in my experience, it won't last that long. I don't think I've ever used the entire 2 minutes. Usually, you make your selection pretty quickly. Number 5, when it's a player's turn to pick, they select what percentage of a film they would like to purchase. They can choose any film and any percentage of that film as long as that particular one hasn't been selected. Once the draft is completed, each player will have 12 picks. Of those picks, a player will set their starting lineup with 10 of those picks. So you have 2 substitutes. And in a later video, I'll talk about the substitutes and how those work. And then finally, number 7, the player who has the most total points at the end of the game wins. So, how do we determine what movie does the best? Well, this is where it gets a little complicated. But once you learn the formula, it will be second nature. The first thing is, well, for right now anyway, just forget the gross box office a film makes. That'll come into play later, but for right now, just put it aside. So in our game, we have three types of films: low budget films, medium budget films, and blockbusters. Any film with a budget of 0 to 49 million is considered a low budget film. Any film with a budget of 50 to 99 million is considered a medium budget films. And all films budgeted over $100 million are considered blockbusters. So why do we have the films broken up into these categories? Well, because it's not fair to judge the $200 million X-Men movie against the $9 million Purge film. We want films like The Purge to be somewhat competitive with the big blockbusters, but not so much that they overtake them. So how do we do this? By offering incentives for each category of the films. We do that by having ceilings and floors for each of the categories. Now, this is a new addition to the game, but I feel it's a critical one. The ceilings and the floors determine how much or how little a movie can make for you. As I said earlier, the category which a film falls into determines its ceiling and its floor. Now let's start with the low budget film first. Okay, remember that the low budget films are films with less than $50 million, or films with budgets of less than $50 million. For these, the floor is $100 million and the ceiling is $200 million. That means that if a film such as The Purge only makes $20 million in the box office, it will be bumped up to $100 million. But say it makes $210 million, since it passed its ceiling, it would be considered quote-unquote capped out, and its value would return to the ceiling of $200 million. I hope that makes sense. If not, we're going to have some examples. Now, for the medium budget films, those costing between $50 and $99 million, the floor on these is $75 million and the ceiling is $225 million. So right now you can see that if you have a choice between two films, one is a low budget film and the other is a medium budget film, and you think both will cap out, i.e. make it to their ceilings and make the most that they can, you would choose the medium budget film because it has a higher ceiling. The most a low budget film can make is $200 million, while the medium budget can make $225 million. But if you flip it around, say it's late in the draft and you have a choice between a low and a medium budget film, but you don't think either one will make a lot of money, which one do you choose? Well, in this case, it makes sense to choose the low budget film because the floor is higher. Its floor is $100 million and the medium budget film's floor is $75 million. Okay, so I hope you have an understanding of the low and medium budget film categories and how they work. Now let's get to the big boys, the blockbusters. Blockbusters are any films with budgets greater than $100 million. These are the superstars of the draft. Much like a running back in an NFL football draft, a good year by a blockbuster can be a good year for you, but a poor year from a blockbuster can ruin your chances of winning. The ceiling on the blockbusters is $250 million, which you can see is the highest of the three categories, which is why you would want to pick a blockbuster that you think will do well. For instance, if you had a choice between 40% of a blockbuster, 40% of a medium budget film, and 40% of a low budget film, and you thought all films would do well, you would choose the blockbuster just because it has the ability to make more money for you. But the blockbusters have the lowest floors. The floors for the blockbusters are $50 million. Now, with this year's draft, two blockbusters, Captain America 2 and Transformers 4, were each capped at $250 million. That meant that they made more than their ceiling. But the two lowest performing movies in the whole draft are blockbusters. Transcendence, and Edge of Tomorrow. Those films did not reach the $50 million floor, so they were bumped up to that $50 million, or they would be in this draft. Okay, so let's recap. The game will have 4 to 10 players. Draft order will be randomized. There will be 12 rounds, and each player will get a pick in each round. There will be 44 movies in this draft. All 44 fall into one of 3 categories: low budget, which is 0 to 49 million, medium budget, 50 to 99 million, and blockbusters, anything over 100 million for their budget. Blockbusters have a ceiling of 250 million, medium budget films have a ceiling of 225, and low budget films have a ceiling of 200 million. Low budget films have the highest floor at 100 million, followed by medium budget films with a floor of 75, and then blockbusters floor is 50 million. As a player, your goal is to make the most money out of your picks. When it's your turn, you can select any of the percentages, which are 40%, 30%, 20%, and 10% of any film, so long as it hasn't been taken. And since we're around 10 minutes, I think I'm going to break this up into 2 parts. The second part will consist of me explaining how we do our math, where we get our figures from, and the general strategies for the game. Stay tuned, I should have it posted fairly soon.